There's so much interest in how the right arm works during the swing, and justifiably so, because the right arm movement is going to make a difference to your club path approaching the ball, the angle of attack, how steeply or shallow the club approaches the ball, the contact point with the ground, which is absolutely critical for making clean shots, as well as controlling the club face. In short, movement of the right arm affects just about everything to do with impact, control, and distance of your shots. So we better take a look at it. We're going to look at what the right arm does, how it should be positioned, and then how you should move. So let's start at the beginning, at address, because that's the foundation of everything that's going to happen beyond that. When I set myself up, my elbows are pointed towards my hips. That's the first checkpoint. So my left elbow is pointed towards my left hip. My right elbow is pointed towards my right hip. And when we look from down the line, we can see that my right elbow is actually bent at address. So my arms are hanging freely, and my right elbow is hanging and slightly bent. Now, as far as the orientation of the arm, I see a lot of players set up with the elbow rotated out this way. Now, because of the range of movement that I can take because of the bones in my forearm and the bones in my wrist, I can set myself up and I can rotate my elbow so it's pointed toward my left hip. I can point it at my right hip. I can rotate it so it's aiming down the fairway there. The only one that feels comfortable to me is this one here. But the fact is that I've got quite a lot of range of movement. Now, you may have more or less range than that, but it should mean that unless there's been some major trauma with your elbow, there shouldn't be any reason why you can't set yourself up with that elbow pointed toward the hip here. Again, keep the tension out of it, allow it to hang, and that's our start point. Now, during the swing, as I move the club to the top of the swing, my arms are going to lift away from my body and my elbow is going to fold to roughly 90 degrees here. Now, I don't have a whole lot of range of movement that I require for the arms, and we're talking about the right arm here, to work correctly. So if I just go back to the top of the swing, and at the top of the swing I can see my right elbow's bent about 90 degrees, and now from here, without moving my arms, if I rotate back to address, you can see that my upper arms have moved away from the body a little bit, and my hands have moved from being a little bit forward of the center line of my body to a little bit behind center with my body. So there hasn't been a whole lot of movement. I definitely have swung back without allowing any rotation of the arm, any lifting of the arm, any holding of the arm against my side. I've allowed that arm to work quite freely. And it's easy for me to say freely because it's a natural movement. You might need to practice the movement. So keep watching it for the other checkpoints that we can make sure that right elbow works more correctly. But for the moment, we keep the arm soft, and all I'm going to do with the start of my swing is move the club away from me to my right, and my right elbow should fold very lightly as I swing the club away from the ball. Next little checkpoint is if I consider the seam on the side of my shirt here. When I set myself up, my elbow is well in front of that seam. Now, during my backswing, I'm going to try and keep my elbow in front of the seam. So I'm never going to allow it to move back behind the seam at any point. So as I start back, elbow's in front of the seam. I move the club back, my seam's still here. So my elbow is actually still in front of my seam. Even when I get to here and I've rotated my body, the seam of my shirt's right around here, but my elbow's only here. So again, it hasn't moved back behind the seam of my shirt. So monitoring that movement with the seam of the shirt, you might find you feel like the elbow doesn't move a whole lot when you swing back, and that's going to be absolutely correct for you. So club will swing back, elbow stays in front of the seam, no problem whatsoever. Now let's switch our attention to what happens and how the arm moves in the downswing. So let's say I'm going to throw a ball sidearm, and I look at the cues to be able to throw correctly. So let's have a look at what those cues are for this right arm throw. So first of all, I'd move my body forward, so I'm shifting pressure forward before I have a lot of movement with my arm. In fact, I might even, if I'm looking to throw the ball a long way, I'll step forward as my arm goes back. So there's an order of movement here that what I'm looking to observe. Now, if we focus in on what's happening with the arm, from here, as I start to create that throwing motion, my elbow is in front of my wrist, which is in front of my fingers. And now as I'm creating that throwing motion, at some point, the hand and wrist will catch up and pass. But I'm trying to keep my elbow in front of my wrist for as long as I possibly can during the throw. That's going to create like a lagging motion. It's going to allow momentum to transfer from my body through to my arm, through to my fingers to throw the ball. If I threw it without doing any of that, I'd lack speed with my arm and the ball wouldn't go very far. Probably wouldn't go very straight either. So now let's have a look and see how that operates in the golf swing. So when I swing back to the top of my backswing and start my downswing, my lower body will move first, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. My lower body will move first. Now my elbow is staying well in front of my hands, which is in front of my club head. And then as I move down, at some point the club's going to begin to catch up, but I'm looking to time it so that it doesn't catch up until I strike the ball. In fact, even when I strike the ball, my right elbow has still got some bend in it. It's definitely not 90 degrees like it was at the top of the swing. So it has been straightening during the downswing, so I haven't tried to hold it bent, but I definitely haven't tried to make it go straight. It'll naturally go straight as I move down and through. Now, one of the ways that I can practice that is by making one arm swings. Now the first one I'll do incorrectly. So if I move the club back and now I'm going to hardly move my right shoulder at all and my body, you'll notice that the club, my elbow, straightens out really, really early. When I'm moving my body, the elbow can't straighten out as early. So the requirement for my body to be involved is huge. So now let's look at shifting our focus to what the body's actually doing during the swing. So from here, as I start my downswing, and I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit. So I'm still in posture, my body's rotated. Now from here, I'm going to move my hips that way toward the target. At the very start of the downswing, you notice that I haven't begun to turn my hips. As soon as I start to turn, then all of a sudden I can run out of room. Now my elbow feels like it's sort of stuck or jammed and I can't move freely. From here, if I start by moving forward before my hips are turning, they're happening almost the same time, but like I said, I'm exaggerating this. Now my arms are going to move down a little bit, so the club stays on the correct path, my elbow stays bent, and I can deliver the club to the ball correctly. So when I'm playing this shot, from here, looking from front on, I've got this forward movement, and in fact, just to talk about that forward movement a little bit, I'm going to begin to move forward even before I get to the end of the backswing. So from here, I'll swing the club back. When I get to about hip height, I might have about 90% of, let's say 80 to 85% of pressure on my right foot. When I get to the end of the backswing, I've actually started to move forward. So now, that 80 to 85 here has turned into about 75 to 80 here. I've still got more pressure on my right foot, but it's already begun moving that way. So now that's going to make it a lot easier for me to continue moving forward, give myself room so that the elbow can move correctly, and it should be good. The last thing I want to do is to create any movement where I'm trying to jam my arm into my side. I see that really, really commonly. Players putting wood covers or towels under their arms. If you do that, only ever do it with short swings, because with a full swing, your arms do have to move away from your side, and if I had anything there, it would drop out, and it should. So let's have a look and see if I can retain posture and retain the bend with the right arm as I go through. So have a look at those things. Get set up right first. Set the right arm correctly. No tension, it's just hanging, but it happens to sit in the right spot. As you move back and through, allow the elbow to fold to a maximum, say, of about 90 degrees as you go back. Make sure it doesn't get behind the shirt seam, and have the feeling of how your body is also involved in it. Let me know how you go with those things. Are there any other drills that you've done to help your right arm move more correctly? If so, let me know in the comments.